Welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something pretty interesting, I think, from the book of Judges,
Okay.
um, and specifically chapter 2.
Right.
And this chapter kind of gets into like what happens when, a new generation comes along and they've lost touch with uh, the values and the experiences, of those who came before them,
Mm.
which I think is pretty relevant even for us today.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. This chapter kind of picks up right after, Joshua, who was the leader who brought the Israelites into the Promised Land.
Right.
He passes away, so a new generation comes up, and they
Right.
really haven't directly experienced those struggles and victories that really shaped their parents' faith.
Yeah, it's interesting because like, you read that and you think, oh, they just forgot about God.
Right.
But I wonder if it was more than just like simple forgetfulness.
Yeah.
Like what would it actually take for like a whole generation to just kind of turn away from what they'd been taught?
That's a great point. And I think, the text kind of describes them turning to other gods,
Right.
like Baal and Ashtaroth, which were really popular in the surrounding Canaanite culture.
Okay.
So it seems like it was kind of a gradual drift, influenced by the world around them,
Hmm.
not necessarily like an overnight rejection of their beliefs.
So it's more like they lost sight of like their own heritage
Huh.
and started adopting the values of their neighbors.
Exactly, yeah. And what's so fascinating is that it leads to this cycle.
Okay.
So they drift away from their core principles.
Hmm.
They then face hardship and oppression.
Right.
They cry out for help. God sends a judge to deliver them.
Okay.
Things improve for a while, and then the cycle just repeats with the next generation.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a pretty stark warning, right?
Yeah.
That, forgetting where you came from and the principles that led to success can have some pretty serious consequences.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it really highlights the importance of generational responsibility,
Hmm.
of intentionally passing down wisdom and values to those who come after us.
Right.
Because if we don't, it's easy to fall back into those same cycles of hardship.
Yeah.
And, this idea of forgetting isn't limited to just, religious faith.
Right.
We can kind of see this play out in all sorts of ways throughout history and even today.
Oh, that's interesting. So, like, what are some things that we're in danger of forgetting today? Like, what are some principles or values that were once central that we kind of see fading away?
Well, there's certainly a lot of potential examples,
Yeah.
depending on your perspective. But some might argue that we're losing sight of the importance of hard work and perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so easy to get caught up in the desire for instant gratification these days.
Yeah.
And we lose sight of the value of long-term effort.
I can definitely see that. It's like everything is about speed and efficiency these days.
Right.
Like we've lost touch with the idea that some things just take, time and dedication.
Exactly. And another one that, another value that might be fading is critical thinking.
Yeah.
With so much information coming at us from all directions,
Oh, for sure.
it can be tough to sort through it all
Yeah.
and really discern truth from falsehood.
Right.
It takes real effort to question what we hear and see and to think for ourselves.
And that ties into like the importance of community too, right?
Absolutely.
If we're all isolated in our own little bubbles of information,
Right.
it's harder to have those conversations and challenge each other's perspectives.
Yeah, community is vital because it provides a space for dialogue.
Yeah.
For sharing different viewpoints, for holding each other accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Without that sense of shared responsibility, it's easy to drift away from those core values that bind us together as a society.
There's also this really thought-provoking detail in Judges 2 that I wanted to bring up. It says that God didn't completely wipe out the enemies of the Israelites.
Mm.
He actually left some of them in the land. And I was kind of surprised by that. It almost seems like he's setting them up for failure.
It's an interesting point.
Yeah.
The text suggests that these enemies were left to test the Israelites,
Okay.
to see if they would remain faithful to God's commands.
So it's not about punishment, but about growth.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And I think we can apply that same principle to our own lives.
Mhm.
Challenges, even setbacks, and what we might perceive as enemies can actually be opportunities for us to refine our values
Right.
and deepen our commitment to what we believe in.
So it's like those challenges can actually make us stronger.
Precisely, yeah. It's
Mhm.
about finding the strength and the wisdom to navigate those difficult situations
Yeah.
while holding on to our core principles.
And this brings us back to kind of the cyclical nature of the story in Judges.
Right.
It's this pattern of progress and decline,
Hmm.
of remembering and forgetting that seems to play out over and over again.
Yeah.
Do you, do you think we're doomed to repeat those same patterns today?
It's certainly a risk, but I don't think it's inevitable.
Okay.
I think Judges 2 serves as both a warning and a source of hope.
Hmm.
It reminds us that forgetting our values and failing to pass them on can lead to some serious consequences.
Yeah.
But it also shows us that even when we stumble, even when we stray from what we know to be true, there's always a chance to turn back,
Okay.
to learn from our mistakes and to build a better future.
So what can we do to like break those cycles?
Hmm.
What steps can we take to make sure we don't become the generation that forgets? It can feel kind of overwhelming, when you think about like all the things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
But like what can we actually do to make sure we don't repeat those mistakes?
Well, I think it starts with individual responsibility.
Yeah. Okay.
Each of us has a role to play in preserving and passing on the values that we believe in. It's about being intentional, making choices that align with those values in our daily lives,
Right.
and then sharing those experiences with others.
So it's not just about like holding on to these values for ourselves,
Right.
but like actively finding ways to pass them on.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like a torch that needs to be passed from one generation to the next.
Yeah.
And we have a responsibility to keep that flame alive.
That makes me think about like, the families and communities that have managed to like keep their traditions and values alive,
Hmm.
like for generations.
Yeah.
There's something really powerful about that continuity.
There is. And it often involves storytelling,
Yeah.
you know, sharing the stories of those who came before us, their struggles and their triumphs.
Hmm.
Those stories help us understand where we come from and why those values are so important.
It's like those stories become a living history,
Yeah.
a way to connect the past to the present.
Right. And it's not just about preserving the past,
Oh.
but it's also about adapting those values to the challenges of the present and the future.
Okay.
We need to be able to apply those principles, in new and creative ways
Hmm.
to the issues that we're facing today.
So it's a combination of remembering and innovating,
Exactly.
holding on to what's essential, but also finding ways to make it relevant for like, the world we live in now.
Exactly. And I think that's a really hopeful message to take away from Judges 2.
Yeah.
Even though it highlights the dangers of forgetting,
Hmm.
it also reminds us that we have the power to choose a different path.
Right.
We can learn from the mistakes of the past
Yeah.
and work together to build a future where those values continue to thrive.
That's a really inspiring way to wrap up this deep dive.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for sharing your insights.
It's been my pleasure.
And for our listener out there, we'd love for you to take a moment and reflect on what we've discussed today. What values or principles from your own family or cultural heritage do you feel are worth preserving? And what steps can you take, even small ones, to ensure that they are passed on to future generations? Remember, you have a role to play in shaping the future. Thanks for joining us.